Hey there YouTube, I'm Ikitsu, this is the Ikitsu Times. Welcome to my channel, welcome to a little bit of Sins of a Solar Empire 2. So today we're going to be talking about the Oblivia Dreadnought, which is the Advent Wrath command ship, and it is an extremely powerful and extremely straightforward ship. Now, it is a bit of a glass cannon, so there are specific things you need to do to keep it alive. It's not got the best abilities, but when it comes to just going up and punching someone straight in the jaw, the Oblivia is probably actually the best ship in the game. I think that this can actually scale to the point where it does more anti-Titan damage than any of the other Titans, any of the Titans in the game. Like, I think individually one of these guys could, like, outdamage a Titan. They won't necessarily win because their abilities are weaker, and they don't have as good of defenses. So a Titan could potentially like take one out using some tricks based on their abilities, or the fact that they're much more durable. But in terms of raw damage output, the Oblivia actually is going to beat the Titan in that, like, just hands down. So anyway, let's go over the stats here. It's got a durability of 600. It's got 8,500 shield points, 1,650 armor points, 7,250 hull points, and 415 antimatter. For what it is, the skew towards shields and hull is a little bit high. Its armor points are okay, but they're not fantastic, which does leave this on the flimsier end as far as command ships go. It does, however, have an excellent armor strength at 100, and its speed is okay at 650. So it's pretty capable. I think that this ship is not like super flimsy. It's just that it has no survivability abilities except for one, which is situational. So for weapons, we're looking at 3 groups of strikecraft, which is sort of standard here, and then we've got the weapons. I'm going to be going over the base values here. It's got six super heavy plasma at 12.5 damage per second with 1,000 pierce. That's a total of 75 damage per second with 1,000 pierce. It's got 4 heavy plasmas at 5 damage per second with 750 pierce. That's a total of 20 damage per second. Against a Titan, this is the important values because this is 95 damage per second against Titans, which is a really decent amount of damage. However, the thing to remember about why Advent are not normally given ridiculously high plasma damages is because their ability to scale plasma damage is super obnoxious. They can get to ungodly amounts of damage with each of these super heavy plasmas. I'm talking like 60 damage per plasma cannon, dealing a total of like 360 of 1,000 pierce damage, and substantially more across the board sort of overall. I think you can actually even get higher than that. It's an insane amount of damage that you're capable of getting with Advent, using sort of stacking buffs for that. The 12 medium plasmas over here, I don't actually know that all of them are capable of converging on a frontal target, but nearly all of them can as far as I can tell. So 12 medium plasmas, 5 damage per second, that's 60 damage per second with 600 pierce. So we're adding an additional 60 on top of our 95, that's 155 damage per second. That all goes through the durability of command ships. This is the best anti-command ship damage in the game on any of the base command ships. And it is really good to be able to do that kind of damage with an Advent ship. Normally, Advent ships are trying to do really tricky, sort of like obscure things using their abilities in weird ways. The Oblivia doesn't need to do that. The Oblivia can just sort of punch people straight in the jaw and they'll go down. 7 heavy lasers at 7.5 damage per second each with 300 pierce, and that totals up to 52.5. Now that one's not great. The pierce being 300 instead of 200 is actually kind of okay though. So you're doing a divide by 3 for the heavy lasers, bringing them down to a little bit under 20 damage per second against capital ships. So this is still capable of dealing the most damage out of like all of these guys against heavier ships. It's kind of in the ballpark where like you can't just fight this thing head on. You do have to use weird tricks to fight it. It's rare for Advent to have a ship that's sort of designed with that philosophy. Because even the Radiance, which I always talk about being like really good into the other 2 battleships, it wins that by having like tricks. It doesn't win that in a straight up fight necessarily just by stat checking, or it has to have like really overpowered items attached to it that makes it so that they can sort of outmuscle their opponents. But just by default, they don't actually win that fight. Same thing with a lot of Advent ships. This one just wins straight up fights. Even with those statistics not being like that impressive, it still is capable of just straight up winning those fights there. Very good. Notably, this doesn't have any weird item requirements similar to the Kavarakov, so you can just itemize this the way that you want to, which is really nice. First ability here, Psykinetic Blast. It has a cooldown of 45 seconds, scales down to 20 seconds, range of 10,000, antimatter cost of 100, scaling up to 125. It's fairly costly, especially considering how fast you can cast it. It deals 400 damage with 500 pierce against an enemy target, which, when you actually break it down, is pretty decent damage per second, scaling up to 750, and it also does half of your psi power in damage against that target. So you could pretty easily do like 1,000 damage with this thing at maximum level with 500 pierce. And doing that every 20 seconds is not terrible. That's pretty okay damage per second, but it's nothing fancy. What you really take this for is the fact that it can shove a target. It pushes them to a speed of 500 for 3 seconds, but I kind of think that it actually causes them to move further than 1,500. I think they maintain momentum a little bit, and then they sort of slow down, and then they come back. But it's hard for me to actually tell. I don't actually know what the units as far as distances are in this game necessarily, because they're very wibbly. The radiuses don't look like proper radiuses, and like the difference between a 4,000 radius ability is very clearly not half of an 8,000 radius ability, so I don't know what they're doing for that sort of thing. Anyhow, yeah, so this is a really good ability. It lets you displace enemy ships that are in their formation that are trying to be in position so that they can use their abilities properly, and it lets you sort of like disrupt channels. It lets you disrupt a lot of effects that enemies are trying to do. It's long enough range that if your opponent's trying to rush in with a bunch of fleet like coals or something like that, you could push a couple of the coals back so that they're not in the fight, so it just reduces the damage output of the enemy by like 3 coals. And then maybe even a bit more than that, because you could push back one of the ones that actually does contact you, so they can't use their second beams. So it could give you a little bit more time against those, and then you instantly kill coals as well. So it's a pretty good ability. I think that it's probably going to be the one that a lot of people take. The next one I think is a bit underestimated. I think this is very strong. This has a cooldown of 90 seconds, scaling down to 65, range of 9,000, antimatter cost of 50, scaling up to 75, and it has a radius of 2,500. This has a duration of 15 seconds, scaling up to, I actually have to double check that number. I believe it's scaling up to 40 seconds on this one. Yep, that is correct. And what it does to the targets in that area is it steals antimatter from them. And note, this is a steal, not a antimatter deletion. So if you hit like a whole bunch of support ships, your Oblivia going from like practically no antimatter can basically be topped off. Even if you're just hitting like a cluster of capital ships, this can actually fill you back up enough that you can do another Psykinetic Blast or something like that. So this is actually surprisingly decent for keeping you sustained in a fight. The other effect of it is the only defensive ability this really has. It increases the energy weapon reload rate of enemy ships by 5%, scaling up to 30% at maximum level, and then also having a bit of a psi power ratio to that. So if you're up against a lot of ships that use energy weapons, you can reduce their damage by a significant amount by reducing their weapon reload and making it so that they fire at you a lot slower. If you're up against, like, say, tech, where they barely have anything that has beams, then this isn't really that powerful of a defensive tool. You're going to be wishing you had point defense instead or something like that. But against certain Visari ships and against certain Advent ships, this could really make a big difference for your survivability. I think this is mostly good, actually, in the Advent versus Advent mirror match, where a lot of Advent's weapons, especially like their plasmas, are notably energy weapons. So you should take this definitely in that case, but it's still useful against all the other factions, especially because anything that can suppress antimatter that the enemy has is always really, really good. The next ability is actually really weird. So I think I've seen people taking this, but Volatile Plasma is actually really bad. Every time a plasma weapon hits, it gives a 15% chance to add a stack. This thing will basically finish stacking immediately, so we can ignore that kind of. Up to a maximum of 10 stacks, and none of those numbers change except for the on-hit chance, which is kind of irrelevant because you'll fill it up really fast with this ship. The effect per stack is it does 5 damage per second. That does not scale. They have 1,000 pierce, and it has a duration that goes from 15 seconds to, I think, like 20 seconds. I don't really care. So the reason that this is so bad is that the damage on the Oblivia is already so high. And while this could be good if you're for some reason running in Oblivia with no weapons, and just trying to grind down targets by like having it poke each target in turn with like a full volley of plasma and then let the volatile plasma finish it off for some reason. Generally speaking, I've gotten these things to the point of dealing damage so quickly that it's impossible for me to not kill a target in a single burst, in which case I lose the entire volatile plasma effect because it's already dead. Or if I'm up against something that is tougher, like a starbase or something like that, it takes me like just a couple volleys to ramp up, but by the time I've ramped up, it's already dead. Like these things kill things stupid fast. So adding a 50 per second dot to that is really, really inconsequential. Now, the secondary effect of this is also bad. It has a radius of 3,000 and deals 750 damage with 1,000 pierce when the Oblivia is destroyed. So if you're in the red and you know that you can't get out, you can run this into the enemy fleet and it'll blow up and deal a bit of damage to everything around it. 750 is not enough damage for an Oblivia destroying itself, and you don't want to be losing the Oblivia in the first place. So just being able to sort of Hail Mary pass this thing into the enemy lines like a hot potato is not really that cost efficient, especially when it's only doing damage that will leave, even frigates alive. There's corvettes that survive that, right? This is a ridiculously bad amount of damage on both the effects here. So I think that this ability is just complete lemon. I would not take it, but there are certain circumstances, like you're firing at star bases, maybe that maybe it could be potentially useful. But we'll sort of show you why it's not later. So next one is Stasis Beam. This is your ultimate ability. It's got a cooldown of 3 minutes, and I believe it scales down to 2. Range of 9,000. Antimatter cost is a whopping 200, and it goes up to, I believe, 300. And it has a duration locked at 20 seconds. So what does this do? Well, it says it causes the enemy to take 10% extra damage, going up to 25% at the next level, and having psi power scaling. That's not the important part of this. Psychokinetic Lance, the Stasis Beam uses your Psychokinetic Lance to hold the enemy in place and disable them. They're completely just stuck there while you get to use Stasis Beam on them, and then unload all of your stuff onto that ship, dealing that extra damage to it. If you're doing this and you've got like one of these guys locking down an enemy capital ship, it's just deleted. It can't get out. It can't use abilities to get out. It can't do anything. It just immediately evaporates. And it is going to kill a capital ship within those 20 seconds, basically guaranteed. Very, very powerful ability for winning out on duels or picking out targets or making sure that your opponent, as they're trying to run away, you can catch a couple with stasis beams. Very, very good ability for what the ship is doing. So let's take a look at the text here. I think that this is one of those ships that, again, you kind of can get away with only being level 1 at the start there. You're probably going to want Psychokinetic Blast at level 1, but that's just because like it's a useful utility tool where you can sort of push enemies around and make it so that they're not fighting at their most effective. But you could also start with Subsume Energy. This is not terrible either. This would be a compositional choice, whereas this would be the more all-arounder choice. Starting at level 2 lets you start off with both of those, but I don't actually think the Oblivia's abilities are like super, super key to its identity or what it does. So levels are a little bit less important in some ways for this guy, although you do gain stats when you level. Obviously, everything in the psi power tree is going to be really, really important for you. The crucial ones are, of course, like the Psionic Dynamo, the Psychic plating, and most important of all, the Vex Amplifier. That's really, really key to this guy. Harmony Circuit's also quite good. Yeah, you can make use of all of those with this thing, depending on how you're deciding to build it. As far as the energy tree goes, obviously your shields are going to be a massive part of this because it's got so much of it, but it's a little bit more fragile. It's harder to use things like Cascade Shield Restoration to get that huge shield bonus back on this particular ship. You, in my opinion, want to actually be protecting these guys using the rest of your fleet, because these things are so powerful that they will clear out like your entire enemy's cap fleet if you're using them correctly. So having the rest of your fleet be things like Dominas and things that can do taunts like the Radiance, having a whole bunch of stuff like that makes it so that you don't have to worry about the lifespan of your of your Oblivia. Having a bunch of point defense, I think, is also really good for these guys. For offense, the only thing you really care about is plasma. Like, obviously, you do need to get into the energy stuff so that you can get access to the energy accelerator, and so you could get access to the plasma stuff. But the most important item is your plasma concentrator. It's probably actually less important than the Vex Amplifier, actually, but that's because the Vex Amplifier is really, really good. The Antimatter is kind of important. You do spend a lot, and it makes it more likely you'll be able to use the stasis beam if you are accidentally casting a bunch of stuff. But it's possible for you to actually maintain your high amounts of antimatter with the ship without having to take this tech. So I'd say it's pretty low priority. As far as structure goes, I think that this thing is already like a little bit tough, but it's not like hyper durable. It again requires other things to keep it alive. Obviously, you're not going to need missiles in this particular case. The hull points are going to be really important, and the armor is always good, but it can't get the best value out of that kind of thing there. Again, we're trying to rely as much as possible on some other things with this ship to keep it alive. In Harmony Research, you do have access to that additional 30 psi power, but notably for Advent Wrath, you also have an additional 20% damage from Fury of the Unity. Adding this on really does help quite a decent amount. Mass Transcendence is also very powerful, but again, the ship can actually kind of do okay without the levels. Obviously, you still want them, but it's not like that important for this faction as compared to the Justitia. The Justitia really wants levels. As far as Unity goes, I do think that you get a decent amount of benefit out of Chastise if your opponent's trying to run away from you, but that's about the only time that this is really super necessary. You could use Chastise to try and escape with your Oblivia if it finds itself completely overwhelmed, which can happen, in which case popping this could help you get out of a bad situation, but I don't think it's that common that you're going to have a really one-sided fight where you have to run away unless you've misplayed, and your opponent's probably not going to get caught out by Chastise necessarily unless they also get caught out unawares. Avatar, this is the one that I think is best for these guys. You can basically make it so that all of them are doing an extra 30% damage, and one of them has that extra 100 psi power. That's incredibly powerful for Advent Wrath. So this is a very powerful effect for them. Fury can actually be quite decent for these guys. If you're playing a build around these guys, you can use Fury to make it so that your enemy's lighter ships all get sort of blown up using that ability there, which does help a decent amount. Conversion is completely useless for this because you've got like your conversion ability on your Titan. That's a much stronger one because it flips the enemy to your side when it bombs them. It's still good as a bombardment ability, but I don't think that you want to use your Unity on that. It's also difficult to get like 50% aligned population on enemy planets. So there's a lot of things that make this thing not necessarily that great. It is actually enough damage, though, to like actually have a planet join your faction. So it's not the worst, but it is difficult to get this thing to work the way you want it to, and you've got other things that can do it a little bit better. Yeah, so I don't think that Unity synergizes super well with these guys, with the exception of Avatar. It's not anywhere near as weird as the Justitia with its ability to sort of mix it up with that. But it's still, nice to have access to that. So let's take a look at items. So you're not building your items in this case for your build. Like you can build a Psychotic Blast one, a Subsume Energy, or even a Volatile Plasma one if you really wanted to. And the items selection doesn't really change. The things that are going to change are like how confident you feel in being able to protect this guy. Because this thing can benefit from an absolutely insane amount of extra damage. So you've got the Plasma Weapon damage upgrade, and this one actually goes up to 75% as its actual value there. And 75% damage increase on all of your weapons is already really good. You can get an additional 45% on the weapon range and damage on this guy, and I think that that's actually really nice to have the additional range on this, because it's already pretty long range, 8,000 I believe, and you can get that extra 45% that puts you pretty far back and lets you sort of use other ships as a way of actually tanking for your fleet, forcing them to sort of get past to get there. And since it's also pushing enemies away, it can actually be kind of hard to rush down this particular ship. So you definitely want those two. But Vex Amplifier is where you're going to be getting the largest amount of damage. You can get a silly amount of extra attack speed from the Vex Amplifier, to the point where it's like giving you 150% extra firepower speed. You're going to be firing enough extra damage from just this item that it kind of is more than the Plasma Agitator and the Energy Accelerator combined. So I think that all three of these, you definitely just slap them onto here. If you're being insane and extreme, you can get an additional 10% damage, or weapon reload rather, from the Plasma Nova Generator. I don't recommend that. It's not enough for me to want to do that, but that is, I should note, there as an option. So from there, we've got 3 offense tools. You're going to want the Harmony Circuit and you're going to want the Psionic Dynamo. In fact, you want to be using these things just to power up that Psionic Dynamo more than anything else, because that's going to give you better attack speed. For defense, that leaves us with one option, and because of what we're doing, it's got to be either the Psychokinetic Plating or the Consecration Inducer. And that's only because we're having like that really high psi power here. I actually think the Concentration Inducer runs into the problem, though, of being like just fairly weak. Not because it's necessarily bad, but because the cooldown is so brutal. 6 minutes is way too long of a cooldown for the effect that you're getting off of this thing. So you're much better off, in my opinion, getting the Psychokinetic Plating. You could get the Synchronous Shield. It gives you a lot of extra shield, and that's really, really powerful. And in this case, that may be more valuable, but it doesn't synergize as well as it does with Psychokinetic Plating. If you're going this route, don't do this against the Sulfuric Tyrant or whatever, Solarcan Tyrant. And you're just going to have this thing surrounded by enough Iconus Guardians to keep it healed up. Because if you can't do that, then you could be in trouble with this thing. If you have to, though, you don't have to go this all in on offense. Now, if you are going this all in on offense, do remember, you are getting a lot of extra range on your shots. So you are capable of keeping this thing into the back line and having it fire artillery shells from like really, really far away. And if anything scary comes towards them, they can Psychokinetic that blast that way. It's perfectly fine in that case. And if it does get ambushed by some big scary thing, they can also stasis beam that. So that gives you enough time to get another Psychokinetic blast that away again. So it's actually very difficult necessarily to go after an Oblivia that's doing all this stuff, that has a really competent front line of ships that are blocking for it. But assuming that for some reason you can't manage to do that, what I would say that you really, really want are the Plasma Agitator and the Vex Amplifier. And you're going to want the Psychokinetic Plating, the Synchronous Shield, and you still want the Harmony Circuit and the Psionic Dynamo. If you really don't want the Psionic Dynamo, you can get rid of that and get the Structural Force Fields if you really just have to go tanky. But largely speaking, I would say that you always want the Plasma Agitator and the Vex Amplifier on the ship. Bare minimum as far as offense goes. If you want to go absolutely crazy, there is like the extra way to go, like the Plasma Agitator, Vex Amplifier, Energy Accelerator, the Plasma Nova Generator, and then the Harmony Circuit and the Psionic Dynamo. You're complete glass cannon. You're at the mercy of your enemy if they get anywhere near you. You have to have excellent support for this thing if you're doing that, but you will kill ships probably faster than just about anything else that's out there. So I have to show you guys, I think, like how insane the damage can actually get on this ship, because I think that people sort of are going to like not quite understand what I'm talking about when I talk about this thing being really, really high damage here. So this is not actually the highest value that you can get on a Oblivia, but it's pretty close to the theoretical maximum of what you could possibly get in an Oblivia. I don't actually care to get the complete maximum, because it just is kind of fiddly and annoying. So this is an amount that you could consider to be like sort of actually almost realistic. We have got all of the sort of like items that I was talking about there. We got like the Plasma Agitator, Vex Amplifier, Energy Accelerator, Harmony Circuit, Psionic Dynamo, and Psychokinetic Plating. And we're under Unity Protectorate. We got 90 stacks off the Psionic Dynamo, or 9 stacks rather. And we've got our Vex Amplifier giving us minus 116%. I can't remember if we've already cast. I don't think. Yeah, it looks like we've already cast Avatar, so that's already on there. Yeah, so all that's going on here. Which one has Avatar, actually?
Our hearts burn with rage.
This one's got Avatar Aura. Which one has Avatar actually cast on it?
Stabilized.
This one does. So we'll look at this one because it'll have that sort of higher value from that. Yeah, so we're getting like absolutely crazy amounts of extra armor. Our damage is... So one of our super heavy plasmas is doing 116.9 damage with 1,000 Pierce. So our total damage for all of those put together is close to 700. So that's 700 damage per second at 1,000 pierce. We got 4 heavy plasmas, each doing 46.8 damage per second with 750 pierce. We're looking at very close to 200 off that. Not quite, but very close. Then we got the 12 medium plasmas, again at 600 pierce with 46.8 damage each. That is like about 550. It's a bit over 500. And then we got seven heavy lasers, which we don't really care about. It's a kind of grotesque amount of damage that these things are at this point capable of outputting. We're talking like 1,700 damage per second from these guys, and that's capable of like putting enough damage out there that it'll kill basically whatever they sort of look at really, really fast. So these are unfortunately not the best targets, but let's just, okay, everything's okay. Yeah, we're not even letting the Psychic Lance actually hit anything because everything's dying before these things can actually hit it. So this kind of potential is kind of impossible to resist. Like, you're just going to die.
Our hearts burn with rage.
I kind of can't let these guys fire at the same targets, because if they do, then the thing that they hit gets overkilled by the full volley of what they're doing. Because one full volley from one of these guys actually basically kills an enemy, or comes close to it. So this is what I'm talking about when I talk about the damage output of the Oblivia, and why it's more important to think of ways to protect this thing rather than thinking about ways to make this thing durable. Because if you're killing things this fast, you kind of don't have to care that much about like the survivability of this thing, because everything's dead, so they can't hurt it. These damage values are enough to get rid of capital ships within literal seconds. If you're using the stasis beam, if you're able to lock something into stasis beam and you've got that cast on them, you'll be killing a capital ship before the duration even gets to like half, basically, because it's taking like an additional 58% damage. So it's not taking 1,700 damage like I sort of predicted. I'm not doing the math, I don't care. But if you're hitting stasis beam on that guy, they're not taking like 1,700, 1,800 damage. They're taking like 2,600, 2,700, whatever damage per second, every single second. And that's for 20 seconds. They're not going to survive that. You could, if you're like against something really scary, throw the stasis beam on it, and it's not damage taken from the one Oblivia. It's damage taken from every source. You point all 3 Oblivias at that one target that's taking 58% additional damage, and it's just going to get mopped. It's going to just be deleted no matter how durable it is. And Ankleon is going to die before the 20 seconds are up. It's that powerful. So that's kind of the strength of the Oblivia. It's absolutely nutty how much damage this thing is capable of doing. It's to the point where there's a very high possibility, since we're looking at long-range guns, that we hit our targets before they're capable of actually doing anything to us. Because if we look here, like, this is the range for a Psychic Blast. It's 9,000. It's 10,000 range, and it goes to about here. The gun range is actually longer than 10,000. We can actually kill a target from past the range that we can use Psychic Blast from. And that does mean that like a capital ship that doesn't have like 10,000 range on their stuff, or even one that does, could feasibly see itself getting killed before it even gets into range of the Oblivia Dreadnought to use its ability. I think the things that have like 15,000 range, like a Marza on its abilities, can reach these guys before these guys can hit them. But the Marza can't really stun these guys up long enough for them to not just like walk right up and slap the Marzas in the face and kill them all. These things are stupid strong, and a lot of that comes down to the strength of like the Advent weapon systems there. We got this one 144% from the Vex amplifier plus the 5% base. That's 149%. This isn't even optimized. I know I can get that higher. So yeah, like the amount of damage that you're getting off these guys, it's insane. It's absolutely insane. And as a result, I think that these things can get away with having their sort of lackluster-ish abilities, except for Volatile Plasma, which has no excuse. But like Subsume Energy, it's fine. It's like an okay ability there. Energy Weapon Reload getting putzed by about like 60% almost. a little bit over that. So like that's really nice. Stealing a decent amount of antimatter. If you're playing as a faction that uses a lot of energy weapons, subsume energy is instantly deleting your ability to deal damage. You add a suppression aura from the Titan, and basically enemy energy weapons doing 0 damage per second. That helps protect these guys quite nicely. You just add in a bunch of like Iconis Guardians, keep these guys alive, use motherships, keep lots of point defense around. Like that's kind of the way to go with these guys, in my opinion. There does mean that they're a bit mono build, but I think that when you've got something that is this just brute forcey, this is probably the best way to use it. So in any event, though, that's going to be our video for today. I hope you found this one enjoyable, and of course, as always, hope to see you guys all next time.